Meeting. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining tonight's Planning Commission meeting. The first item on the agenda, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'll ask that you rise and face the flag and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Venus, can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Baldino.
Here.
Chair Newman. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Newman.
She's here.
Commissioner Keldoff.
Here.
Commissioner Heschler.
I'm here.
And our new commissioner is McGay.
McGuy. Present.
McGuy. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next on the agenda, public communications. Is there any public communications or anyone joining us who has a comment for the Planning Commission?
There are no
Eduardo,
written communications to distribute.
Okay. You
And
seeing
I don't
any
know-
notifications?
Yeah, and it seems like everyone on this Zoom list is all related to the application at hand.
All right. Thank you. I'll close public communications. Next item on the agenda, the consent calendar. There being no items. Written communications, agenda item G. No written communications, correct, Eduardo?
Correct.
Okay, that brings us to new business. First item of business in our agenda is EA 1289, a project at 650 North Pacific Coast Highways. We're looking at a zone text amendment and final mitigated negative declaration for this project. And can we have a staff report, please?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to our one of our planning consultants. His name is David Blumenthal. He, as you know, we've had an increase in the amount of workload here. And so we brought in Mr. Blumenthal to help us out with this project. And he's also helping us out with some other projects that will be coming to you, to the commission in the future. But we did bring him in on board to help us out with this project. So he's been managing it just like any other city staff person would have managed this project, including the environmental component, ensuring that our CEQA consultant conducted the documents and on budget and on time. And also joining us is Jen Wu with Michael Baker, who is the representative of that company who put together the neg deck as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to David so he can give you all a presentation and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Let me go ahead and share for the PowerPoint. Perfect. So the item before you tonight is a request for a zone text amendment, a vesting tentative parcel map, a site plan review, and environmental assessment for a property at 650 North PCH. The property itself is located on the east side of Pacific Coast Highway. It's between Maple and Mariposa, and you can see that the address is 650 and 700 PCH. The property also involves the former rail spur and the parcel at 737 Lairport. I'm going to zoom into the property a little bit more here so we can see the area at hand. So building A is 650 PCH. This is an 8-story building. It's 98,000 square feet, and that's net floor area. Building B is 700 PCH, and this is a 2-story existing office building, and this is about 69,600 square feet of floor area, and again, net floor area. And building D, and I understand we did skip building C, and you'll understand that in a moment. But building D is 737 Lairport. This is an industrial building. It's 1 story. It's about 16,600 square feet. Now, for the purpose of tonight's discussion, no action is taking place on Building D. So this report, we're going to skip over any references for Building D. This will be focusing on the rest of the property. Oh, and I apologize. The remainder of the property you'll see behind Building A is all surface parking lot. The applicant's proposal is to combine all 7 parcels into a single lot. And with that, they will be constructing, improving Building A's and Building B and constructing a new Building C. So here we have Building A and Building B, and then Building C will go into the parking lot behind Building A, and this will be on the east side of Building A. This building will be a new office building, 7 stories, and it will have an integrated parking structure. The renovations to Building A do include expanding the existing penthouse. That's adding about 3,900 square feet to the existing penthouse level, and there'll be a new roof deck added to the building. The first and second floors of this building are reduced in square footage. Floors 3 through 7 will have a slight 140 square foot increase in square footage on each of them, and the 8th floor will have about 250 square foot increase. When the project is complete, the overall building net square floor area increases 1,031 square feet. Additionally, the applicant will be conducting facade modifications. This includes replacing the existing facades with new curtain wall glazing on the east and west sides. New metal grate projections will also be added. A new opening in the lobby will be added to the first floor, and steel trellis will be added to the roof deck to give it a very modern kind of look. Building B, which you see before you now, will be reduced from the current 69,000 square feet to 65,120 square feet. The reduction in floor area will come in the phase of a new large atrium in the center of the building, new entry courtyards, and to provide for new elevators within the building itself. As with Building A, they will be doing facade modifications, adding new fenestrations to the building so they can put additional glazing and add new light into the building, and staining the bricks to ensure the color palette is consistent with Building A. For Building C, this is our new Building C that will be proposed. Building C is 7 stories tall. It is approximately 70,921 square feet of net floor area of office space, and has the integrated 1,185 square foot, I'm sorry, 1,185 space parking structure. The office space is located on the western side of the building, and parking primarily being on the eastern side of the building. However, the second and third floors of this building are completely parking and have no office space on them. As with the other buildings, they do utilize a very contemporary design with a lot of glazing, and there'll be the exposed concrete floor slabs. Between Building A and Building C will be a new pedestrian-oriented courtyard. This courtyard does have a lot of seating, pedestrian-friendly pathways, and it will be shaded with large specimen-sized trees, including the Coast Live Oak, Brisbane box, and the sycamore trees. The site for parking has been looked at, and the areas highlighted in orange are essentially the new parking areas. The primary parking will be within the Building C parking structure, with additional parking located on the north and east sides of Building B. The proposed project currently requires 663 parking spaces. However, the applicant's providing a little over 1,200 parking spaces. So there'll be a surplus of parking for the site. Also, as part of that, as future uses come in, this gives them the ability to add some higher demand parking uses. A condition of approval has been recommended in the conditions of approval that the city will reanalyze parking anytime a new use does come in to ensure that they don't exceed the amount of parking that's provided on the site. Now, as part of the application, the applicant has requested a change to the zone text amendment, zoning code. And this is to deal with the definition of floor area for net. Currently, the exemptions from floor area include parking, surface parking and parking structures if they are standalone structures. However, because the parking lot that they're proposing is integrated, it does not qualify under the current exemption. The proposed amendment would change that and exclude all parking from being calculated into the floor area for the net, and this would then also exempt it from the floor area ratio calculations of the building. Essentially, you'll be changing section 15-1-6 of the municipal code, reference to the definition of floor area net. Sections E will be deleting section F, and then what is currently section G would become the new section F. Now, as part of the city's review, we did the standard environmental analysis on this project. There was a 30-day public review for the environmental document that went out from February 5th to the March 10th. As a result of this public review, the city received 3 letters related to the environmental document. First letter came in from Caltrans, and that was to say that they were in support of the transportation demand for the project and to remind the city that work in the public right of way, since PCH is a Caltrans highway, could require encroachment permit from them. The second letter came in from the property owners to the south. This is probably the most critical of the letters. Initially, there was conversation in the mitigated neg deck that said that there was an access way from the south across that property. However, these property owners should bring it to the city's attention as well as the applicant's attention that there is no recorded easement for that access way. So it did result in a slight project redesign to avoid the need for crossing the adjoining property. And then the final letter did come in from the county sanitation district just to clarify the wastewater flows, which was incorporated into the environmental document. Also, as required by AB 52, the city did conduct the tribal notification and did consult with the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Keenes Nation. The consultation has been concluded and did result in mitigation measures that were agreed to by both the tribe and the city and have been incorporated into the environmental document. Based on this environmental documentation, we have mitigation measures for aesthetics, cultural resources, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, transportation, and tribal cultural resources. The mitigation measures do provide that if they're implemented, the project will not result in any kind of significant environmental impact. For tonight's action, we are requesting that the Planning Commission review this action. We have 3 resolutions before you. One is to recommend that the City Council adopt the negative declaration. Second resolution will be recommending the City Council approve the zone text amendment. And the third resolution would be for the City Council to approve the vesting tentative parcel map and the site plan review. The reason why these project is going before the City Council is because the zone text amendment does require council action for final. So the entire project will be sent along with that action. With that, that will conclude my report, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, David. My question is about the zone text amendment. We're amending the definition of FAR. So would this amendment apply to both commercial and residential and basically apply to all zones across the city?
This definition is changing the definition to the floor area. The changes, however, yes, it would apply across the board the way it's currently written.
So are we now changing the parking FAR requirements for residential because of this one project citywide?
Well, the parking requirement, parking would be exempt from FAR essentially is the way that this would be applied.
Right, but this definition, even though we're making it for this one project on PCH and it would apply to all commercial, you're telling us it would also apply to any residential construction.
Yes.
Okay. Eduardo, Sam, have we thought about the consequences of what impact, if any, this would have on future residential development? I'm thinking about ADUs and townhomes and things in the R3.
And even mixed use projects like down the road, given the focus on housing in general.
Yeah, well, in terms of FAR, you know, when it comes to residential projects, the residential zone has its own standards for FAR. And really, although these definitions do apply citywide, the applicability really at the end of the day to residential projects is really going to be minimal or if any real tangible impact. Because again, residential zone has its own definition and standards of what constitutes lot coverage and FAR. And so we would just be relying on that. And ultimately, when it comes to residential projects that have a parking structure, you know, that isn't included into a residential property's FAR anyway. So I think ultimately, once this really is applied, it really only affects commercial and industrial properties.
Maybe this is in the, tell me if this is in the conversation period versus the question period, and then I'll hold. But I guess when I'm thinking of a mixed use residential development, like things that we know are already coming down the pipe, is there then an opportunity, then building subterranean parking is way more expensive than above grade parking. So for this site, I think it makes sense. It looks good. It's a commercial project. They're well below their height restriction. But going forward, things that we don't even know necessarily are coming or other projects that we're already aware of, is it incentivizing developers to build above grade parking, less levels of residential to still meet the height restriction? And we're just limiting ourselves in the number of residential units that could be developed. So I'm not necessarily thinking of the R1 or even ADUs. I'm thinking of future larger scale projects.
Yeah, and I think some of those larger future projects, they're coming in as specific plans anyways. So those would kind of have their own standards, if you will, and would address the issue of FAR. You know, ultimately, would this be encouraging above grade parking structures? You know, I guess that could be a big question mark. I mean, that would, you know, ultimately need to be, you know, we'll see. But I think looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, you know, do you count these parking spaces towards an FAR calculation when all it's really doing is providing parking, you know, to count as FAR when it's not creating any kind of usable area? You know, I think it really works against a lot of applicants and developers, and really, you know, creates a situation where the design may end up being, you know, would lack, as opposed to allowing, you know, these things not to be counted towards FAR, because you can truly get office and other true square footage, usable square footage, you know, when you don't have to worry about counting parking structures towards your FAR.
So let me ask, is this something where we're cleaning up our codes to make them more usable? Is that what we're doing?
It is, and as a matter of fact, to be quite frank, this was one of the items that was going to appear on our code cleanup, and as you know, more of the code cleanup portion will be coming to you, the Planning Commission, in the near future. What the commission just recently looked at was kind of more of the procedures and stuff that, you know, updates that we have to our zoning code. And that was purposely put forward to the commission first because we wanted to make sure that procedurally all these things work before we come back to you with a general cleanup. So we were going to actually have this definition change in the code cleanup, but because this project was moving so much faster than the code cleanup, we decided to just incorporate that into this application and this project.
Can I ask a kind of, well, it's a very hypothetical question, but we have some lots in Smoky Hollow that are designated parking, essentially, right? I mean, what happens? Do they then have infinite FARs as a result of this if they're all above grade parking?
So Smoky Hollow has its own standards. They have their own development standards, and so long as they're complying with the standards that and the definition of what constitutes FAR that are contained within the specific plan document, you know, this would only apply if none of that were to have been addressed in the specific plan. But that Smoky Hollow specific plan does address those situations about FAR and parking.
We're defining FAR across all zones in this section, right? Is that so? I don't know. I think it creates some sort of an unclear situation in other scenarios. Again, not in this scenario, totally get it. But to have that broad-based definition change in our ordinance then makes us have to re-explain it in other specific plans, I think.
Yeah, and ultimately, if the specific plan is not specific enough, if you will, not to be redundant, to say, you know, if FAR is not defined in the specific plan, then yes, you do revert back to what the development code says, what the zoning code says, and apply those standards. It's just like any other standard of the code or the zoning code. If it's not blatantly indicated in a specific plan as to how to deal with certain development standards, then you revert back to the zoning code. So same thing in this situation. So if Smoky Hollow or the future Pacific Coast Commons project does not contain those definitions, then yes, we do revert back to the zoning code for implementation of those standards.
Anything else, Michelle, on that?
We can discuss it maybe as a group afterwards. I don't know. I know the specific plan is going to come with its own FAR, but is then the developer, and that obviously, you know, it's not part of their plan. So it's hypothetical and it's devil's advocate because we already know what their plan looks like and that's not part of it. But some project that we don't even know is coming down the road. Like there's a huge downtown specific redevelopment going on. Is somebody going to say, but look, here's your FAR and above ground parking doesn't count. So I'm going to do my 3 stories of above grade parking and put my units above that or whatever it is and still be within the FAR. And I guess, yes, because we would have probably height restrictions that would prohibit that. So maybe that's not going to be an issue, but does it create some sort of inconsistency down the road?
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of specific plans. I mean, you know, take downtown, for example. I mean, it all depends on what the vision is. I mean, if we don't want to have these large parking structures, then we could totally write it up in a manner that really discourages that or just blatantly prohibits it. So I think, yeah. So when it comes to specific plans, that is the beauty of it because they are standards that are, you know, specific to a given area of town or property in town, and you have specific design guidelines, specific development standards that are applicable to that property or all those properties that are contained within that specific plan. You know, regardless of what the general what the general standards are of the municipal code or the zoning code, again, it's applicable to those properties.
Only other question, do
Yeah,
we know what other? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm not worried about specific plans. I'm worried about the unintended consequences of someone who doesn't need a specific plan because they're within the code. And have we thought about how that's going to affect specific plans? I get it. We get to negotiate and make requirements and do what we want, but I'm worried about changing a definition citywide. Have we thought about any unintended consequences this may bring? But if you're telling me, look, this was flagged as an item that needed to be cleaned up in our next go around, then it's an easier way to do it as opposed to making a specific plan, then that makes sense to me. And we've done that before. We've done it in the past very successfully. And if that's what you're telling me, then I'm a little less concerned about it, but we can definitely talk about it more, Michelle.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, let me add into that too, something for you to consider on that as you deliberate. You already exempt parking structures from this requirement. What this change does is parking structures that are integrated into a building versus a standalone parking structure.
Okay. Okay. Do you know in other jurisdictions, other cities, is this something that, and I'm trying to think, like, does City of LA count that as FAR? No.
I can't speak directly for the City of LA, but typically cities do exempt parking from triggering more parking and triggering floor area requirements.
David, can you take me through the traffic flow of how these cars are coming in and exiting? Is it all on PCH?
Yes, 100% PCH. Let me go back to our site plan. So here we are with the site plan. There are two driveways on PCH, one driveway on the south side of the site. This goes under building A and drops down, and this portion of the site is below the PCH grade levels. And then there's a second driveway on the north side of the buildings. The driveway that we thought initially, and the project was changed for, came off the adjoining properties here off the south, but that's been eliminated now. So cars can come in off PCH. They'll be able to circle around and transition into the parking structure. There's entrance here and here. And then they can go out, or come in on the north side too. This part that you see highlighted right here is just the fire lane. So cars will not be driving through this part of it, and there'll be some design measures incorporated to discourage drivers from being able to utilize that area.
Okay, so is the south driveway enter only and the north driveway exit only?
You know, the applicant is in attendance tonight. Both driveways are sufficient size to accommodate entrance and exit, but the applicant can speak a little bit more to the operations of the site.
Okay, and then where in the environmental impact are the trip generator and traffic studies?
I'll
have a page number
defer
for
that
me?
to Jen Wu with our environmental consultant.
Hi, Jen.
Hi there. Yes, so we did conduct a vehicle miles traveled analysis in our mitigated negative declaration, and also conducted a level service and trip generation analysis. And so what would you like to
What are the page numbers on that so I can take a look at it?
Oh,
No, in the packet?
well,
Was it not provided to us? I guess that's my question. I don't recall seeing a traffic study or trip generated study. Was that in the 244 pages we got?
Yeah, you know, it refers to the appendices, which there are links to. So, but the actual physical studies were not incorporated into this document. So I apologize for that. But yeah, there are links to it, which they are all available on the city's website. But yeah, like for example, the traffic impact analysis that was performed by Kimley Horn, and you know, they did their analysis again. Their analysis included both an LOS, level of service, to really account for the amount of traffic increase, and then also to abide by the new CEQA guidelines, to also conducted VMT analyses, both of which came in as less than significant with with incorporation of mitigation, which is why we have a mitigation measure in the document to ensure that the impacts are less than significant.
Can you point me to that leak in my packet? I'd like to see that report, please. Or you can email it to me, whatever's quickest for you, but I'd like to see it.
I will.
Any other questions for staff before we open this up for the applicant?
Yeah, real quick on the level of service analysis, I was looking at the traffic study, the standalone traffic study, and it does say that there is a significant impact at one of the, am I reading that? For table, it's in table 3. It's the existing plus project, the intersection of PCH and Imperial. And it says effect significant, and it's the only one that's marked yes.
Correct. So with the level of service analysis, that was conducted as information. It was included in the mitigated negative declaration for informational purposes only, and it was conducted to be provided to the transportation department for their review and conditioning of the project. Since currently the CEQA guidelines point to vehicle miles traveled for environmental impacts, then a level of service effects are no longer considered environmental impacts. And
Wait,
by
say
the
that
way,
again. You're saying that we're looking at miles traveled, not level of service at intersections that are impacted by more traffic? When did that change?
That was in about July of 2020, I believe, was when the revisions to the CEQA guidelines were released for VMT.
Yeah, if I can chime in, this is John Bellis, also with Michael Baker. The change in CEQA thresholds for transportation stemmed from SB 743, which I believe was adopted in 2013. And OPR, the Office of Planning and Research, has been going through studies and implementation of that directive by the legislature. And the actual change from LOS to VMT became effective July 1st of 2020.
So, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify.
What does that stand for?
I'm sorry, vehicle miles traveled. And what the legislation says is that once OPR, the Office of Planning and Research, had adopted the guidelines, that traffic impacts based on vehicle congestion are no longer subject to CEQA, that VMT, vehicle miles traveled, or something similar that considers a mix of land uses and greenhouse gas emissions are the then appropriate type of metrics to evaluate impacts on the transportation system. So as Jen pointed out, the city also, in addition to the CEQA required vehicle miles traveled analyses, in this case, the city also had a level of service traffic congestion analysis prepared, but the impacts that it shows are not subject to CEQA. It's for informational purposes only, and so that the city can identify the right conditions to apply to the project.
And how does one determine the amount of miles a car will travel to an office building that doesn't even have tenants yet? I mean, is there a formula? There's some type of algorithm?
There is, and we have Pranish from Kimley Horn who conducted the study. Maybe Pranish, you can give a little bit more of a detailed description than I can, but there are calculators that have been created by traffic consultants, transportation consultants, and by some of the agencies overseeing transportation and vehicle miles traveled like SCAG and others, that it's based on a regional transportation model, but I'll turn it over to Pranish.
Thanks, John. Pranish Tarikare with Kimley Horn. We conducted the traffic study as well as the vehicle miles traveled analysis for this project. The way vehicle miles traveled is defined is, there are two components to it. The number of trips that a project generates, and then how long the length that those vehicles travel. So the trips times the length is what vehicle miles traveled is. And for the city of El Segundo, Kimley Horn did conduct, SB 743 implementation study, and it was determined that the SCAG model, that's the regional model, would be used to determine the vehicle miles traveled. And to your question about how you can determine for a future project that's not already there, there is socioeconomic data in that SCAG model where you input the number of employees estimated for such a use. So that goes into the traffic analysis zone, and the model output is taken and then calculate the length and the number of trips generated, and that's how you calculate VMT. And then you compare that to the regional average, and there are thresholds where you compare that to whether, if it's more than or less than the threshold. If it's more than the threshold, there are some mitigation measures like transportation demand management measures that could be applied to bring down the VMT.
Okay, thank you for that. That helps explain it somewhat.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for staff?
So this implementation of the bill is something that I've been tracking through, in my professional world. And I don't agree with it. My problem with it is that it takes what used to be localized impacts at intersections and road segments to regional impacts. So as a local planning commission, for me, in this role, I'm more concerned about the localized impacts. So let me ask you, what's required with the VMT analysis? That's the minimum that you have to do for CEQA. Do municipalities have the option to make a little stricter to require a level of service requirements in environmental analyses? Is that an option that the city of El Segundo can start including in their own CEQA documents?
So this is John again with Michael Baker, and I could start. I'd be interested to hear Eduardo or David or Jen if they have anything to add. But I think the simple answer is no. I think the consensus is no, that the legislature which enacted CEQA has also now put a parameter on the way that transportation impacts are studied under CEQA. And it specifically said in SB 743 that measures of traffic congestion, such as level of service, can no longer be considered significant impacts under CEQA. So it doesn't say they can't be evaluated, it just says they can't be considered significant impacts under CEQA.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Can I add in, and I'm sorry, my computer froze for a second there for me. You are addressing local impacts already through your zoning code. Condition number 24 kind of reiterates that the traffic mitigation fees do have to be paid for the project, and that's based on your local impacts.
And Kevin, if we did a specific plan, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Eduardo or Sam, I think then the city has the authority to require a loss of service analysis for any development, but this is not a specific plan. So if we're dealing with just CEQA, it makes sense that the state would kind of override, whatever our ability is to make requirements in the CEQA world. But someone answer my question: if we were doing a specific development plan, could we require a loss of service analysis?
So again, this is John with Michael Baker. I would say that yes, it's in the city's purview to require that analysis and to consider the results of that analysis and through the city's planning process to identify the right way to deal with traffic congestion throughout the city, whether it be through a change in the city's street network or in other transportation improvements. I think where it changes with SB 743 is that it's no longer those, what we used to call traffic impacts, are no longer subject to CEQA. And so you wouldn't see them in the CEQA document, even in, say, a new specific plan. They would be more part of the planning process rather than part of the CEQA analysis.
So to kind of tack on to that, so the general plan circulation element has a statement in there that the goal of the city of El Segundo is to have level of service, I think D and above. So it goes further to say that level of service E and F are unacceptable. So could I make the argument that it is not consistent with the general plan if it is at a level of E or F? If some of the intersections are, and there's a significant impact?
So I would say that the consistency with the general plan is a separate issue as to whether or not there are CEQA impacts. So I would continue to say that there's not a CEQA impact, even if the general plan has a goal or a policy for maintaining a certain level of service. And then with regard to consistency with the general plan, and this isn't my area of expertise, but from what I understand, the determination of consistency with a plan like a general plan is based on multiple factors, and that even if one or more policies or goals of a general plan are not complied with, doesn't necessarily render a project inconsistent with the general plan as a whole. It may conflict with one policy or maybe not implement one policy or goal, but that doesn't render it necessarily inconsistent with the general plan. It has to be looked at in totality. So that's my more generalist perspective. I would turn to Eduardo and David to maybe give more of a professional planner's response.
Yeah, I'm back. I apologize. My computer froze up. I got booted off, so I'm just coming now back onto the tail end of this. But it sounds like, John was making the point about the distinction between the CEQA analysis and the traffic impacts versus the policy. And that is totally correct. I mean, at least from a CEQA standpoint, looking at it from the VMT issue, there's no impact. Now, with regards to the policy, that's true. You may have a policy, but again, doesn't render the project totally inconsistent with the overall intent of the general plan, because there are other policies that it could still be in compliance with and address and adhere to.
Okay, but to be clear, if we're using the VMT model and we're considering for CEQA purposes the regional impact, does that mean that we are not considering the fact that this office building with its 1,200 parking spaces is right next to a Chick-fil-A? Because I know that intersection is impacted. I know that because I live in this town. That's just a fact. So, maybe this is another conversation about CEQA in general, but what in the packet that we've been provided and in these traffic studies can I look to where they talked about the fact that there's a Chick-fil-A right north of this project? Or has that not been considered because that's no longer a CEQA issue?
Right, and I did send the commission the links to the VMT and LOS analysis just a short while ago. But yeah, in terms of the impacts with regards to the LOS and the Chick-fil-A next door and the impacts on that particular intersection, yeah, as of July of 2020, I believe it was, we have by CEQA guidelines have now switched analysis away from that to now being more of the VMT. And really it hones in on the specifics of a project and what is it about the project implementation of it that will reduce the vehicle miles traveled to less than, from a regional standpoint.
And if I can ask a follow-up question, Commissioner, are you asking specifically about the intersection of PCH and Maple?
Yeah, and all intersections north of that.
Okay, so, and I think this gets back to Commissioner McGay's original question. So the level of service analysis that was prepared outside of the CEQA document, but included in the materials in table 3, that is the analysis of the level of service impacts of the existing conditions with the project applied on top of it. At PCH and Maple, which shown in table 3, which is on page 16 of the study, or page 20 of 293 in the PDF version of that study, if you're looking at the same version I am, the same file I am. PCH and Maple is currently operating at a level of service B, and with the project would operate at a level of service C. So there would be a change, but it would not change to an unacceptable level of service per the city's general plan. The intersection that would be affected to a level that is unacceptable is PCH at Imperial Highway. And that would go, again, this is in the existing plus project condition. In the existing condition, it's a level of service E. And in the with project condition, it goes to a level of service F. So there is a degradation there at an already impacted intersection.
Just to point out that this is the modeled level of service and not the actual real world, because I too live in this town and know that intersection is backed up all the time. And I used to do traffic studies earlier in my career, so I know it pretty well. But yeah, it seems to be a big difference between the modeled versus the actual.
Okay.
Oh, let me ask a different question. So clearly there's, whether the analysis is CEQA or vehicle miles traveled, there is going to be an impact. And so what is the mitigation?
So
that's described?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I want to follow up my comments earlier in that I'm digesting a little bit more of the report here as everyone is speaking. And in table 6 of that study, which is on page 25, numerated page 25 of the study, that table presents the opening year conditions, the year 2023 conditions, with and without the project. And even without the project, that singular intersection at PCH and Imperial Highway is operating at a level of service F. And so the project then has a much smaller change on the operations of that intersection. So in the past, we had analyzed existing plus projects, so the project against existing conditions. Because of CEQA purposes, that was something that was done. Even though it wasn't what I would call a meaningful analysis, because it doesn't account for other growth and what's happening, what the project will actually be causing at the day that it's open. So when we look at the opening year, the project's change to that level of service. It doesn't change the letter grade. There is a slight degradation in terms of the numerical vehicle to capacity ratio, but it's again going from level service F to F. And I guess Eduardo or David, what did the Public Works Department, how did they feel about the operations of that intersection with this project? Did they apply any conditions here?
Not to the intersection directly.
No condition. Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is there is mitigation. So the VMT, the vehicle miles traveled analysis, did show a potentially significant impact before mitigation. And that's based on the VMT per employee and against the regional average, as Pranish was saying. So the mitigation that got us to a less than significant level for VMT would also improve the LOS conditions. And that mitigation is a really robust transportation demand management program, a TDM program. and it reduces the VMT per capita, per employee, I should say. So the vehicle miles traveled per employee, it's all about reducing the actual number of trips, the trip generation. And I don't have the number of total trips it reduces off the top of my head.
254.
254, thank you. So it's a reduction in 254 trips from the project site.
And how is that accomplished?
So it's accomplished through a variety of transportation demand management programs. And I might have Jen and Pranish help me out here, but I know part of those are, well, let me turn to Jen because I know she knows them better than I do.
Yeah, actually, this is on, you can see the language of this mitigation measure on page 32 of the packet. And so what this measure provides is a transportation demand management strategy program that incorporates a number of strategies that would help to reduce the number of trips. So this mitigation measure identifies actually more than the required number of strategies, or it identifies strategies that would more than compensate for the number of trips, the 250 trips, just to ensure the effectiveness of the mitigation. And so these include measures such as promoting carpooling and allowing employees to use alternative transportation, using the metro. For instance, the metro station is it's about 0.4 miles from the site. And just overall encouraging the employees in the future to find ways of reducing the number of trips.
So I am totally for that. You know, everyone on this commission knows I love alternate transportation. To me, that sounds like a PR campaign within an office building. And you know, is that really what this is about? Trying to get people to reduce trips, or you hope, you cross your fingers that traffic's going to be less? Because I guarantee, everyone at home watching this, and there's thousands of people watching this right now, all people care about is traffic in this town. And so, that I think putting this in sort of layman's terms so that people understand what traffic mitigation really means, I think will be helpful. Yeah, and that's very true that, there has to be a means of enforcing that this mitigation measure is going to be effective and needs to mitigate for the 254 trips. So there is in the implementation of the mitigation, there is a means for adaptive management, for reporting, for allowing flexibility for the owner or applicant to be able to use different strategies, and to be able to have to adapt to what the employees actually end up doing. And of course, these measures are going to be incentivized to the employees.
Thank you, Jen. And I would also add that while a lot of these sound like feel-good measures, there actually is some science behind their trip reduction. And it's been conducted by, the primary source is what's called the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or OEHA. I'm sorry, I may be wrong about that.
CAPCOA. Yeah.
CAPCOA, yes,
CAPCOA.
thank you, Pranish. CAPCOA, the Air Pollution Officers Society. And they've done some research on how effective these transportation and demand management programs are, and these specific types of actions are. And so they're quantifiable through CAPCOA's studies and the criteria, or the studies that CAPCOA has published.
Who then monitors who who comes in and checks and see that mitigation has actually worked? Is that
If,
staff?
if the project's approved, there's a requirement that they provide annual reporting to the city staff.
Who does, the owner operator?
Yes.
I'd be interested to know if the owner of the property owners have considered any other ingress or egress off the property. I mean, if they know what they have, they know what they're wanting to do with the property, the piece of property, but actually asking all of that traffic to come out onto Pacific Coast Highway is really, that's huge.
And
That's a
Commissioner
lot. I just
Newman,
didn't-
the applicant is here, so when you do take public comment, they will be speaking and they can address those concerns.
Yeah, we haven't finished the question for staff period yet. We haven't even gotten to public comments, but the applicant will get their chance. I know they're being patient. I appreciate that. So before we open public communication, any further questions from staff or our consultants here?
This is one more for me. Actually, two more. But on the enforcement of that, so I'm assuming that this is going to be it's going to be leased out to folks. So the project applicant would then have to keep tabs on their tenants on how they're and their trip reduction. That seems pretty onerous, and I don't know if that would be effective in terms of enforcement. And my second question is, and this is probably a quick one-off, but the facility right below the building right south of it is Expo Logistics. And looking at the aerial, it looks like they have containers or trailers on that side of the north parking lot, the surface area. So if that becomes a parking lot, what happens to those containers? I don't know if they have a transloading operation there, but does that move to the front, the visible side of the street, or are those not belonging to XPO Logistics?
Well, I think the trailers you're seeing are on this property, and from when the aerial was taken was when Boeing was still within the site and operating. I don't know if Expo was agreed with Boeing to utilize that for storage of those trailers. They will need to be moved off the site to accommodate this project. The Expo site will not be changing at all, so they'll have to work within their confines.
Okay, thank you.
And then to answer your first question, it may seem a little onerous that the property owner will need to work with the tenants, but that's something that can be worked out within their leases to make sure that they are all compliant.
Okay, and then for verification, is it enough to just have your TDM and then not worry about the results, or are we going to be concerned about the results to verify the mitigation's working?
You'll want to, and the requirement is that there's an annual verification to ensure that it is working. And if it is not, then they'll need to implement additional mitigation.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I have one last question. If the applicant is requesting double the parking, or that's part of the plan rather, for the parking garage, double the parking that's required, is that very increase of parking adding to this traffic issue, and are those two things related in any way?
No, I think the traffic is and parking, they seem like they're related, but providing the TDM and the mitigation measures to get people out of their cars, I don't think that's really related to the parking directly. They will have excess of parking, but it's something that they can speak to on how they plan on implementing everything and how they plan on utilizing that excess parking.
Yeah, well, I would think giving people more parking than they need, it encourages them to bring their car.
There's a balance in there. If you get too little parking, you end up with people parking in the neighborhood and not necessarily ditching their cars. So there's definitely a balance in there, and providing the resources for people to, alternate work schedules, the public transportation options to them. I think those are really how you get people out of the cars and help out with traffic.
All right, any further questions? If not, I'd like to open public communication. As always, the first right will go to the applicant. Thank you for your patience. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me share our PowerPoint here. I'll be honest, a lot of it is somewhat repetitive of what staff already did, but I do want to leave some time at the end to address, I've been taking good notes here, a number of the questions and the lively debate we've had. So I'll make sure to address each one of those in order. So let me share my screen here for a moment. And I'll start the presentation. All right, well, good evening, Honorable Commissioners. My name is Spencer Kallick with Alan Mackins on behalf of the applicant. Again, I want to start off by thanking city staff, especially Sam Lee, Eduardo Schomburn, and David Blumenthal. We're excited to be presenting the 650 PCH project, a new commercial development that breathes new life into a dated and underutilized property in El Segundo. The goal of this project is to bring a new hub of commercial activity, employment, and economic opportunity to the city. As staff noted, the project is conveniently located along PCH between Mariposa and Maple Avenues, close proximity to LAX, Imperial Freeway, and within walking distance of the Mariposa Metro Station. The 7.2 acre property is currently developed with 3 buildings originally constructed in the 1960s. We refer to them as building A, B, and D. As you'll see on these photos, the existing buildings are quite dated with small window openings and generally closed off design. In fact, this is kind of in keeping with the confidential nature of the prior tenant, Boeing. And what you'll see here is actually that Boeing had walled off the entrance to the property here. This was, to be frank, a very highly confidential Boeing site. And so one of our plans is to really open this up and make it more inviting to the pedestrian experience as well. One thing to note about this property is how underutilized it is. Much of the property is a large surface parking lot with almost no existing greenery or landscaping, and our plan is to change that. The project takes this underutilized property that's ready for refresh and revitalizes it. It creates an employment hub that will lead to 450 new jobs in El Segundo. Our strong hope is that many of the folks who will be working here actually live in and around El Segundo. And it brings an aesthetically pleasing design, creates an open and pedestrian-friendly campus. This is our site plan, which we saw earlier, showing how we're going to utilize space efficiently. And instead of a large surface parking lot, we've repurposed that space with a new building with integrated parking and landscaping to create an interconnected campus. Again, these are the pictures of building A that you already saw. We're going to kind of strip down that old style building that Boeing had here, create large windows and refinish the exterior. We've got a fantastic architect, Shubin Donaldson, Mark Hirschman, and Russell Shubin are with us this evening to answer any questions. Building B will largely match building A. I'll be adding again some elements to make it more inviting. To be frank, I've been in that building many times and you wouldn't want to work in that building. It's kind of a dark hole at the moment. So we're going to try and brighten it up, add some more windows, add some atriums, and make it a place where you'd really like to go and spend your day. And then building C, we're going to take full advantage of that underutilized space. You're going to have a new office space here that's going to be seamlessly integrated with a parking structure. These renderings highlight contemporary design of the building, the materials we're going to use. And I'll say that, especially in this COVID world, we've been giving a lot of thought to what the future of office space is going to look like. And that's why you see these outdoor terraces and meeting areas so that you can really work inside and outside and do so in an environment that is pleasing and you can actually get work done in. In terms of landscaping, right now, this property is virtually a concrete jungle. So we're trying to change that. And Scott Baker from Realm was on the phone, our landscape architect, did a phenomenal job of greening up the space and integrating great softscape, hardscape into this design to really make it a place where people will want to gather. Staff has talked about our requested approvals. I did want to take this opportunity to talk briefly about the zone text amendment because I know it was a source of a lot of conversation earlier. What I would say about the zone text amendment is this is something, as staff mentioned, that staff had said they were already in the process of doing, and then logistically with COVID hit and we submit our project, they asked us to kind of push forward with the zone text amendment. The idea behind the zone text amendment is really that right now, as the zoning code is written, if you have a parking structure, a standalone parking structure, which no one really likes because it's not very aesthetically pleasing and doesn't activate the streetscape, but if you have a standalone parking structure, that doesn't count towards FAR. But as of right now, if you integrate the parking structure into a building, that counts as FAR. And so the idea here is really to allow for really good architectural design, something along those lines, where you get a phenomenal building and the parking is integrated. And again, this is not part of our project now, but the idea would be potentially at a future date when less cars are necessary, that we'd be able to repurpose that space for another use in the future. So overall, we've worked really hard to create a beautiful project, will create jobs and drive economic prosperity within El Segundo. And we request your approval, your recommendation or approval to support this amazing architectural design and solidify El Segundo's place as an economic hub within Southern California. I did want to now, that's kind of concludes my presentation, but I did want to take a moment to kind of tick down the list of questions that I heard that staff answered, but would love to kind of give my perspective from the applicant's point of view as well. The first one I want to talk about, just hit straight on, is parking, because I know that was a question. A couple things. The intention here is to lease this building and this campus to one tenant. That's our hope, right? We want it to be a campus-like feel. To do that, quite frankly, it requires more parking than code requires because that's what the market demand is. But I don't want you to think that we're just asking for more parking for ourselves, because that's not the intention. The intention is to provide parking to other properties in the area. So in the area you have, and I could go back to the very beginning here, but as you probably know, there's a lot of, around here, there's a lot of these old warehouse buildings that have been adaptively reused into creative office space. And one of the biggest challenges is there's not enough parking. So what you have is people who are parking on the street, parking in the neighborhoods, creating other impacts. And so one of the things that staff, as we were thinking through this project, said to us is, hey, can you help us here? Can we work together and provide some additional parking so that we don't have to create more parking structures, but we can serve it within this existing integrated process? And that's something that we're excited to do, and we've implemented as part of our project. The second thing is about this conversation we had about level of service versus vehicle miles traveled. And I get it, it's a change in the law. It's a new thing that a lot of us are still getting used to. But I did want to talk for a minute about the Transportation Demand Management Program. To be blunt, that's something we're quite excited about. That's something that we are looking forward to, and we work closely with city staff and their traffic engineer on, because we think, frankly, it makes our project better. We don't want to have a ton of cars flooding the streets. We want to make sure that when we have a tenant, they're respectful of the neighborhood, that they are in keeping with the neighborhood, and that they come and they shop in El Segundo, they stay in El Segundo. They don't get in their car and drive to Chick-fil-A, right? That they walk, that they take the metro. And so the TDM program is not just window dressing or on a press release. It's actually very real and very important to the way that we're planning to operate this property. And on top of that, as staff has pointed out, there are real teeth to it. There are reporting requirements. And if we don't hold up our end of the bargain, again, that's our intention to do so, but if we don't have a bargain, it's a condition of approval, and city staff can look into that further. But we intend to abide by that. And frankly, I think we're going to even go above and beyond what's required in the program, because that's just the way that our team is looking at this project and that we want to operate our building. There was a question about containers on the property. Those containers have been removed. When Boeing left those containers, took the containers away. So if you drove there today, there would be no containers on the property. There was a question as well about access from Mariposa. There is no access from Mariposa. There is a driveway there that is open right now, but to be emphatically clear, the project will take no access and will either pedestrian, vehicular, or fire access over Mariposa. We are not allowed to. We're not allowed to have access to the property. We don't have an easement. We don't have an ability to do that. Nonetheless, we have had our traffic study looked at, and in terms of ingress and egress, all ingress and egress will be off of PCH, but to go back to our site plan here for a moment, there will be both these two entrances will be ingresses and egress, right turn in, right turn out only, and you'll be able to enter the property this way. So that is our presentation. I know there were a lot of questions that were asked. Certainly welcome any additional questions and look forward to working with you all. And very excited about this project. And again, appreciate your taking the time to give it thoughtful consideration.
Thank you for that. Can you just quickly explain, because when we look at combining these 7 lots into one, you have those strips of land that run south to Mariposa and north. But now you're telling us there's no easement. So is that part of this project, or is this not part of the project?
Yeah, so
is what we're approving just on what that site plan you showed us?
Yeah, so what you're approving does encapsulate, and I can let me just pull it up so that it's clear from our. So the entire property is what's in orange here. And
right.
There is access through this easement, through what used to be an old railroad spur, but it's not vehicular access, it's not very wide. So there is pedestrian access via that rail spur. What I'm saying, or what I was referring to, is there's no access, pedestrian or vehicular access through here, behind what I affectionately call the in and out property here. There's no access permitted there.
What about to the east, that orange line going south?
You're saying up here to Maple, or you're saying up here to the railroad spur?
Down to Mariposa, you take that all the way south?
So there is access, but it's only vehicular. You couldn't put a car down that street, down that road.
Pedestrian.
It's only pedestrian?
Only for pedestrian, correct.
Okay.
And is that an improved?
So it's landlocked except for PCH?
Correct.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask, those little X railroad spurs, will those be improved as well? If it's pedestrian, is that part of the landscaping plan?
Yeah, so it is part of our intention is to make that an area that would be inviting. I mean, we have some ideas about putting some landscaping and some chairs and tables and things for people they can sit out there and have lunch or have meetings and things like that.
Okay, so so rather than dark, scary alley, you're going to try to make it a little more welcoming to encourage pedestrian, because if you were going to walk to the metro, that would be a perfect shortcut to head that way.
You're absolutely right, and that's one we've been thinking about, is how do we have that permeability through the site? And that's something that we've been thinking about, because we want to make sure that people come here and they enjoy working here, that it's not that concrete jungle, but it truly is a place where, frankly, I know all of us have been at home working, but you're going to want to go to work and be here with your colleagues and enjoy the space.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I have a question that I don't know if you can answer yet, but you alluded to it, that it is intended to be a campus, and so you're looking for a single tenant. Any kind of indication on what that market is like? I think it's a little, talking out of both sides to say, I'm concerned about traffic, but I'm also concerned that we have a lot of vacant commercial office space in the city. And is this contributing to that, or how are you going to market this?
It's a great question. I appreciate that. So I'll tell you, we do not have a tenant specifically in mind for this property. It's a little early to start that process, because we're still a couple of years out from finishing construction and delivery, although we are starting to have conversations with potential tenants around what that would look like. What I'll tell you is, this is as it sits here right now, you really couldn't rent it out today, and would invite all of you to come to the building if you'd like. It's actually, it would be a good place for a scary movie, to be honest. It's a really, really, really bad shape. Not because we've put it in bad shape, but it was a secure facility. And what I mean by secure facility was there were skiffs or like rooms where they were doing kind of, call it government testing in the building. So by nature, like there are these crazy like multiple feet wide lead walls and secure facilities. So it's not the kind of thing you could go lease out today. So we're excited to be able to look at what this looks like moving forward with another tenant. The office market, I can tell you, I work at Allen Mackins. We're a real estate firm. This is all we do. The leasing market is coming back. You'd be surprised. People have been on a hold for a long time. They're sitting at home. They can't watch Frozen 2 again for the umpteenth time with their kids screaming in the background. They want to be in the office. And so while some tenants have left, there is an increase in interest. And you've seen, I think, recently some really great leasing that's been done in and around El Segundo. I think it was the Beyond Meat company just took a large space in El Segundo, and others are looking to El Segundo as well. And so I think you will see people who will want to be here, and we're hoping, and I feel relatively confident about this, that people will want to lease our office space because it is somewhat of a unique model in the market. With all those outdoor terraces, with all that open space, with that campus-like feel, it's really going to you're not going to be up in a big glass tower and feel like you can't get outside. You're going to be able to, you know, be outside, open the door, open the window, meet with a group of folks on the patio, and congregate. And I think that will be really important and hopefully a great opportunity for a new tenant to come to El Segundo and help generate great jobs and revenue for the city.
Does your concept hinge on a single tenant, or does it work if you end up with multiple tenants?
It does not hinge on a single tenant. Our desire is to have an anchor tenant. We're not looking to make this into a WeWork or to split it up into 1,000 square foot, you know, office pads, but our desire is to lease it to a single tenant.
There was some conversation, what's today, Thursday? Tuesday at a strategic planning session that the city council did about opportunities to convert some of this commercial space to more incubator friendly space. Is that something that this lends itself to at all?
Absolutely, absolutely. The nice thing about this space is it's kind of a blank box, right? You can put all sorts of office uses. When we say office, we, you know, not, I'm a stuffy attorney. I go to an office space that looks like where a bunch of attorneys work. But you know what? You know, I go to my wife's office. She's in marketing and creative world, and so it's a really fun place to hang out. So there's that. I have, you know, clients of mine who are in the R&D space or who in biotech. I mean, absolutely, we would love to have those type of tenants here, and this space is perfectly catered to those type of tenants.
Do you plan to have any public benefit in that common space? I mean, is there, you know, place to grab a sandwich or things like that? Or are there reasons that people that don't work there might come there? And are those people even welcome? Is the public welcome in that space?
It's a great question. Public is certainly welcome. And it's one of the things we're actually looking forward to. I don't know the last time you walked by the space or drove by the space, but it's basically a bunker at the moment with the way that they put basically like marble on the outside along PCH, and no one can get in. You have to kind of come around and go in, and there's actually barricades the main pedestrian, ingress and egress out. So we're going to take those barriers down. We're going to open up the space, and there is the idea to have kind of a commissary / little kitchen. It's not really a formal restaurant, but the public will certainly be welcome into the building. And I think you'll find, especially along that streetscape there, because I've walked it many times. Right now, you don't really want to walk there. You'll find with the landscaping that Scott Baker from Realm was put together, and the way that our architects have integrated into the design of the building, that it'll be a very welcoming and inviting place. And that's what we want to see happen here.
All right, well, thank you for that presentation. And staff, can you tell me, is there anyone else wishing to make public comments at this time?
I don't think there are, but let's just put it out there one more time. If there are, is anyone that is on the Zoom meeting who wishes to make some comments as members of the public?
I would like to
We will
make a
give
comment.
you, okay, I
Yes.
see someone, Bill Quinsbury.
Go ahead,
Yes.
sir.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Bill Quisenberry, and I'm a member of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, and I'm in support of this 650 North PCH project. This project will create many jobs for residents in the local community. The construction jobs will be good-paying jobs that include fringe benefits like medical, a defined benefit pension, and a vacation check. The project, if approved, also means that the paychecks earned constructing the project will be spent here locally rather than spent elsewhere if an out-of-area contractor with their outside labor is brought in. Also, contractors that employ our members and who have partnered with the developer applicant understand that a skilled trained workforce means productivity and safety are optimized. And that will likely happen if this project gets approved. This project will also mean another opportunity for some of our 2,400 active apprentices to get their on-the-job training that's required to complete their apprenticeship program and become full-fledged journey workers. With an aging workforce in construction, much like many other industry sectors, training the workforce for tomorrow is a constant undertaking. These reasons and many others are why this is a good project. I ask that you approve the project tonight. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, I would also like to speak.
Please, Ralph Velador.
Yes, sir.
Please
Hello
go
there,
ahead.
honorable chair and members of Planning Commission. I also want to echo my brother's words and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here representing the Southern California District Council of Laborers International Union of North America, and we do support this project. And one of the main reasons why we support it is because this developer will use highly skilled union tradesmen to build this project, if approved. This developer is devoted to working safely and paying wages and benefits. And these jobs will give our local members work close to home, keep them off the highways with long commutes, and improve their quality of life and that of their families. And these economic times we have right now is exactly why we need this project right here, right now. This project will invest in a local community and will deliver countless high-quality construction jobs that provide good wages right here in the local community. It allows us to recycle those dollars into our community, and that's a good thing. Our local union members stand ready to build it. And just to summarize, this project not only makes sense, but it also keeps our local economy at this critical time going. And for these reasons, we ask you to approve the project, not only for our members, but for our community, as well as our local economy. Thank you for your time. You have a good night.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to make a public comment on this matter?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Mr. Riviera.
Yes, my name is Eddie Rivera, and I too am a member of the Laborers International Union of North America. As a construction worker, I come before you to ask you to please approve this project and move it to the next phase to get approved. Everything they said is what it's about. It's about the local community. It's about the economic impact with these unemployment numbers that are starting to get better. This would definitely help. Working close to home would be a benefit for a lot of the members that live in the El Segundo South Bay area. Commuting on that 405, the 91, it takes hours away from family time for a lot of our members, construction working men and women. It takes time away from their families, and not to mention adding to the pollution in the air with the vehicles. Anytime we could get off those freeways, you guys, I hope, understand how important it is. And like I said, as a construction worker, we ask you to please approve this project and keep it moving forward. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Going once. All right, seeing no one else speak up, I will close public comment section of this agenda item, and all further comments shall come from the dais. Who would like to go first?
I just tremendously worry about the traffic, but I don't know how or what further mitigations they can use that would eliminate it. You're creating well, you want the project to be very, very successful, but there's going to be so much more traffic right on Pacific Coast Highway with no alternative way. It's too bad that there's not an opportunity to come back around the project to go down, exiting off of East Maple, which would help eliminate some of that gridlock. That's my concern.
No, I agree, Brenda. It's an obvious concern, but it's a dilapidated office building that's going to be redesigned to a new office building. And the way the lot is, I don't see how you get cars in and off that unless you're coming in off of PCH.
Will that have a dedicated ingress egress lane? I'm trying to think. Like I think that we're in and out.
No,
they've got their own.
That dies after you leave in and out. It gets shorter, and now you're in the backup of everyone going to Chick-fil-A on Maple. So you're hitting that Maple intersection, that right-hand lane where you're trying to get there at noon, or you're not moving.
Well, there's no question those buildings are sad. I mean, we've all looked at those buildings for a long time and walked past them, and the new facades and the renderings are beautiful, and it'd be a great addition to the streetscape. That's for sure.
The only real way to not increase the commercial square footage, right, is to remove the zone text amendment, which we were going to do anyway. So feels a little counterintuitive, but going back to the zone text amendment, I wanted to see what staff's take is on limiting that to the commercial and manufacturing. So part of the original language in there is that it pertains to commercial and manufacturing, and that's part of the language that we're now striking from that zone text. Is there, walk me through why that should also apply in residential zones.
Well, the language that limits to commercial and manufacturing zones in the current code is limited to open parking spaces, not so much parking structures. Because it just says parking spaces at above grade, access there to provided manufacturing zones. But parking structure is exempt currently in all zones. So the idea here is that when you have it, and this is under current subdivision F there, where it says structures devoted exclusively to parking, that applies citywide in all zones. What the theory here is whether or not that parking structure is attached or detached from the building, it doesn't count towards the floor area ratio. It's just to kind of treat them a little bit, as fair when they're attached to the building and integrated to, and provides a little bit more flexibility into the site design and layout.
I think Michelle's question is, why don't you modify E to say parking spaces and parking structures, including that portion of any structure that is devoted exclusively to parking in commercial and manufacturing zones?
Correct.
That
absolutely.
And we could do that. Yeah, we could do that. Sorry, David. Just to make it clear, because I think, like I said before, the applicability of this is really going to be in those zones anyways. But to make it clear that yes, it's just to those zones. I mean, we could do exactly what you just suggested, Chair Baldino, is just to keep, after it states devoted exclusively to parking in commercial and manufacturing zones.
Yeah, we're just worried about some unintended consequence.
Right.
I don't think anyone has a problem.
Because right now it is applicable to those two zones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that resolve your concern, Michelle?
It does. I
And
feel like
Chair,
that's the
we would be in
easiest thing.
favor of that. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Calic. Any other comments?
So I'll jump in. So that strip of PCH is really important to El Segundo. I think a lot of people drive through using that corridor and what see is kind of their impression of El Segundo, and a lot of the things there now just aren't pleasing to the eye. So I think that the development that we're looking at, I think will give a good perspective, or give people a good taste of El Segundo and what it is. And I think that redevelop. So I'm supportive of the project from aesthetic, from kind of an El Segundo personality standpoint to the outside world. And I think that redeveloping that entire corridor is important. We have a big project coming up in the future. One of my concerns is that we're kind of piecemealing this corridor and approving them as one-offs instead of looking at the big picture. And I know that CEQA requires a cumulative analysis, but I don't know that the new VMT threshold and methodology really supports a cumulative analysis versus how the level of service would. So that is a concern of mine, but I do think it's a good project, and I think people looking at it as they're driving by, hopefully that they're not driving by too slowly and stuck there, which could be a problem, which is I think a lot of our concerns. I think that we, as the Planning Commission, as the city as a whole, we really have to find out how we can get our arms around this VMT analysis. Again, it's regional versus localized impacts, and for right now, I'm really focused on the localized impacts. So I think that we need to figure out a way to build that into our approval process, or at least our analysis. But I think that this is a really good project overall. But I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And Mr. Calic, please understand, your project is gorgeous. And our conversations about traffic and what we've been talking about have somewhat to do with you, but more of conversations we've been having on this dais for years, especially concerning PCH. You're sandwiched between an In-N-Out and a Chick-fil-A, which is great for the people who work there. I'm sure they'll love it, but it does have traffic concerns. And I think the problem at that Maple intersection has probably more to do with your neighbor of the north than an office building coming online directly to the south of it. So make no mistake, I agree with Kevin 100%. What you've proposed here is a beautiful addition to basically the only part of El Segundo most people see when they come down PCH or they go to LAX or go on their vacation, hopefully soon. And so, it's very impressive. I like that you've thought about how you can integrate more outdoor area. But the questions we're having are more broader questions of how do we as a local planning commission deal with local traffic congestion if CEQA has now removed this loss of service. And it's really a conversation that doesn't concern this particular project, but is a larger conversation we have to have going forward. So again, beautiful project. It's a much needed improvement over that bunker building that we've had there for years. And I'm very curious to see how your traffic plan comes to fruition and how it's enforced. And Eduardo, during planning commissioner comments, just to give you a heads up, I'm going to ask about those Chick-fil-A restrictions we put on the cars not being able to back up on Maple, and if you could figure out what's the status of that, because that may be the real culprit with our problems existing here on PCH. So again, Mr. Kalick, let your client know that we are very appreciative of the modernization, the aesthetic appeal of this project, and over parking is very common. A lot of projects we've seen recently, especially anyone going for a campus, is coming at us with car lifts, and they want to double, if not triple, what the city requires as far as parking. So you're not alone in that.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate it. I don't take it personally, but we want to create a project here that you all are proud of, and that really is kind of a gateway to the city. And we're excited about what we put forth here, and appreciate your kind comments.
Thank you, sir.
And Ryan, real quick, I would say to Mr. Kalick, when you mentioned that if for some reason 20 years from now that we all hope that car demand drops, I love the fact that some of those decks can be converted to other uses, and I think that's really smart. So I hope you have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I haven't given him enough credit, but Mark Hirschman and Russell Shubin, our architect, on the line, and they put a lot of thought into that, because we want to make sure that this is not a building that, you know, will turn into the future, what the Boeing building looks like now. We want it to be a building that will be here for many, many generations and be utilized in a great way to benefit the community.
Right. Excellent.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have one more, just so we can beat traffic down, kick it to the curb. You know, another interesting situation is everyone is going to be heading south, you know, coming from the north is going to have to make a U-turn at Mariposa, right? And so, you know, my guess is that's going to be a traffic problem, maybe even more so than Chick-fil-A backing up. It's neither here nor there. I'm just saying that's a complicated intersection.
Well, it's 100 times better than before In and Out.
Well, that's true. The double lane is helping. Yep.
Right. Exactly. Okay. If there are no other comments from the dais, then I'm going to make a motion to approve EA 1289. But Eduardo, you're clear on the language in the zone text amendment that we're recommending the City Council review?
Yes. So that language would then ultimately read parking spaces and parking structures, including that portion of any structure that is devoted exclusively to parking, that are in commercial and manufacturing zones.
Correct. So then my motion is to move approval subject to that modification to the zone text amendment. Is that proper, Greg? Does that work for you?
That works, but I want to be sure that that language captures your intent and doesn't do more than what you intend. Do you intend for parking spaces and parking structures both to still remain exempt from the FAR calculation in all zones?
No. Well, good point.
Currently, parking spaces and parking structures are exempted from the calculation in all zones.
Yes.
If the only thing you're going for is the portion of any structure part, because I would suggest leaving parking spaces and parking structures as one line item, say line item E, and then adding a line item F that says in commercial and manufacturing zones, comma, that portion of any structure that is devoted exclusively to parking. Is that the intent of the commission?
That is much more clearly stated than what I had proposed.
Okay, then I would recommend doing it that way to avoid any ambiguity or any other unintended consequence here.
That's what we're talking about. So Eduardo, do you get that now? Do you have that change proposed by our city attorney?
Yeah, Greg will go ahead and forward that exact language to me so I can clearly get that in the, in the resolution.
Okay. So then the motion is to adopt and approve EA 1289 and the zone text amendment as modified by our city attorney. Could I have a second?
I will second your motion.
Okay. And Venus, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Chair Baldino,
Aye.
Vice Chair Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kildoff,
Aye.
Commissioner Heschler,
Aye.
and Commissioner McGuy.
Okay, it passes 5-0. Thank you all for answering our questions and for having patience with us. And thank you for bringing us this project. Wish you the best
Thank you very
success.
much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is continued business. There is none. And that brings us a report from our Director of Development Services or designee. Sam, you still there? There you are.
Yeah, Eduardo has a brief presentation, a report on the housing element that you wanted an update on, and then
Great.
I'll end with the quick report as well. Eduardo.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Sam. I'm kind of pinch hitting here for my colleague Paul Samaras, who wasn't able to be here tonight. But nonetheless, we wanted to at least get you some information on the housing element. As you all know, the city has begun its process of amending the city's housing element of the general plan to ensure that we are prepared to meet our future housing needs. As the Planning Commission may already know or will recall, we had a community meeting on April 13th. And in preparation for that, we had advertised that community meeting. We mailed out postcards to nonprofits and stakeholders. We sent out emails to subscribers on the city's communications, new e-letter. We set up a dedicated web page on the city's website. We also advertised for this community meeting, not only on our city website, but in the El Segundo Herald, and used some social media for this, including our beloved YouTube channel. So as indicated, we had this community meeting on April 13th, and let's see if I can go on to the next. Perfect. And so the city held this community meeting via Zoom, as we all know, we're doing most of these things on Zoom lately. And it was attended by a fair amount of people. According to my colleague, there was over 70 people there, and that's in addition to the staff and the consultant team. And so the purpose of the meeting was to really update the community on the work that we as staff in the city have been doing to date, and to also solicit input and their thoughts and ideas regarding the types of housing needs in the community, the population that need the housing the most in our community, and and ultimately the appropriate locations for these housing opportunities. So the meeting, it involved a presentation by city staff, and I don't know if the commission or some of the commissioners were on the meeting, but we did have a presentation by city staff and the consultant team, and it was followed by kind of a Q&A session. And the presentation really covered the topics as I've indicated here on this slide. The definition of a housing element, and really honed in on why the need for these housing elements, and other discussion items on there were some preliminary site inventory, and they showed a map of potential locations of new housing opportunities within the city. They also shared some results from the survey that the city released about a month ago, and it's currently ongoing. And people will have the opportunity to answer or fill out that survey, and I'll leave at the end of this presentation. There'll be a website where you can where the community can find that survey. So the Q&A aspect, according to Paul, said it was very interesting. Staff, he felt that staff did receive a lot of input and questions that would really help staff with drafting this new housing element. And for those that weren't able to attend that meeting, I think the video of that community meeting will be posted on the city's website. So next steps, and just recently, the contract for the housing element CEQA review was approved by the council earlier this week. A couple things that we have coming down the pike, at least tentatively, we have a planning commission workshop, and that is scheduled tentatively for the second meeting in May, which is May 27th. Let's see. Other than that, so more of the long-term steps. Once we actually prepare the housing element, that will be submitted to the state HCD, Housing and Community Development Office of the state, who they'll review that for conformance and ensuring that we are addressing what we need to address for the different populations within the city, most notably the affordable housing, or those who are on the affordable spectrum. So that we anticipate going to them by next or by summer, and ultimately having Planning Commission and City Council review this through notice public hearing, because that is required, and that would we anticipate that going to before you and the council this fall. And because ultimately we do have to get this to HCD by October 15th of this year. So we do have some information on our city's website that Paul has put together. And so I'll leave this up for now. People can go onto the city's website, go to our development services page, and there's a link to the housing element where you can get some additional information. You can get some information on, what is a housing element? Because, many people out there probably don't know what that is, and what are the benefits of having a certified housing element, especially one certified by HCD, that state agency. Also on there, you'll be able to fill out the city survey. That is open until May 17th. And if you have any questions, definitely, forward those on to us. The two addresses you could send those questions to: housingelement@elsegundo.org, or to my colleague Paul, which is psamaras@elsegundo.org, and we'll be able to get your questions answered. But I'll just end on a note that we will be coming, at least we anticipate coming before you as a planning commission to give a presentation and workshop in the second meeting in May. So just wanted to forward this make the commission aware of what's going on up to this point, and push this information out to the public as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. I did attend the meeting. I thought Paul did a nice job. There were a ton of consultants on there who I think did their best to try to explain what the housing element is, because I agree that's probably the biggest hurdle we have, is explaining why this is a mandatory thing we are required to do by the state. And if we don't comply with this, that there will be real consequences. But Eduardo, when this comes before the Planning Commission on the 27th, one of the thoughts I had during a presentation is, you explain to people we need to have 450 units. Of that, 200 need to be low income. And then you throw up a survey, where do you want to put these houses? Most people in town are going to say, as far away from my house as possible, which is the east side of PCH. That is probably a common knee-jerk reaction, but I think people who have that thought probably don't understand the tax ramifications, the school district ramifications of changing our commercial zone east of PCH into residential. So if you could, when this comes as part of the housing element, give a brief description of where do our tax dollars come from, how much tax is generated east of PCH, and explain to us again why it is that El Segundo gets the lowest amount of property tax from residential of any of the South Bay cities. Because I believe if you turned east of PCH into nothing but housing, we would bankrupt this city rather quickly. And so that's just kind of like a fuller picture when we talk about housing and why our city is zoned and designed the way that it is, that I think might bring more of an understanding to people when we're talking about a housing element and how that fits in our small town. But to the extent that you guys are actively pushing on information and people are talking about that, I think that's great. And I'm impressed you had 70 people jump on that Zoom. That's actually a really high number for this type of topic. So good job on that.
Well,
any other comments?
I also attended, and I'm glad we're doing this, glad we're having this conversation as a city. An observation regarding those 70 people, it was nice having that live poll happen through the thing. One of the questions was, are you a homeowner? And I think 75% of the people said yes. And so what that tells me is, there's a big population of our community that's underrepresented in this public forum. And so I would say to the city, you may want to increase your outreach, maybe more social media, telling people about this Zoom call, maybe trying to, not everyone reads the esteemed El Segundo Herald in our town. So, other ways of reaching people might be good, because we do want this a big conversation with the city, with our community rather.
That's a good point, Jay, because about half of our residents are renters.
Yep.
And that portion wasn't as represented.
Right.
Yeah, forgive me, Eduardo, if this was in the summary right there. Do we know the number of survey respondents so far?
I do not know that offhand, and but no, we don't have that information on hand. But we'll make note of that when it comes before the commission.
I think in that community
surveys we got.
There were 500 at the time of that community meeting, which I thought was a pretty good amount given the time, with another month left to go. So be interested what the final turns out to be.
Okay.
As we're grappling with low-income housing, I know the city has $5 million in funds. They've got an RFP out there for someone to tell us how to use this fund to maximize our low-income housing requirements, working on a housing element. I think it would be beneficial for city council to consider appointing a subcommittee to deal expressly with housing and low-income housing within El Segundo, because as it sits right now, we're basically outsourcing all of this to consultants. And I don't know, other than city manager and staff, like where is the community input on a regular kind of monitoring basis, where there are public meetings and there's opportunity for people to come and talk. Because as you've outlined it, you're going to do a couple of web things, you're going to do a couple of surveys, planning commission, city council, and we're done by October. So I know we don't have the authority to create subcommittees, and maybe there's not enough time logistically, but this is not something that's going to stop once we send it to state in October. This is an ongoing issue that we're going to wrestle with as long as we live in this town. So I think there might be some benefit of having a small subcommittee that focuses primarily with complying with housing elements and trying to wrestle with what are we going to do about low-income housing in our town.
That's a great point, Ryan. We are squeezed for time, and like every other city is in California. I actually had a meeting today with many mansions, and we are moving forward with exclusive negotiations with them. And part of their task is to work with the city to develop a strategic plan about affordable housing. And so I actually invited them to a meeting with our housing element consultants to start having that discussion about a strategic plan. But in addition to that, I certainly will forward your thought about a subcommittee.
Thank you, Sam.
And it's my understanding that many mansions, part of in addition to them identifying sites and opportunities. Even before that, they're going to be hosting community meetings
Yes.
themselves,
Yes.
right? And staff will jointly publicize that, and that's going to be a concerted effort together.
Yes, as part of the strategic plan, they are just eager to get the exclusive negotiation done so that they can reach out to the community, so that they can develop a strategic plan.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the report, Eduardo. And tell Paul he did a great job.
Well, I think Paul and the group did a wonderful job. I have one more thing to share with the commission. Let's see here. How do I do this? Share. And so, first of all, I wanted to welcome Commissioner Magai to a wonderful group. I believe the best commission in the city.
Best planning commission in the city.
Oh, I would say more than that, but I wanted to let the commissioners know that tonight is my final planning commission meeting. I'd like to thank all the commissioners for their support over the past 13 years. I prepared a short presentation in preparation of this day. I didn't know when that day was going to come, but the city takes aerial photos. I don't know if you knew this, but the city spends quite a bit of money taking an aerial photo of the city every 10 years. So in my office, I'm the only one who has a 2008 map. Everybody got rid of it and replaced it with the 2018 map. And I started to compare the two maps. And on the surface or from afar, you can't really tell. But I started to take a look at the map, and then I started to start marking up projects that you and I and us have done over the last decade. And I started to pick out, Elevon was one of our first projects that went through. Then there was the, this is a little bit later on, but the Raytheon campus was a huge project that the commission did. There was 888 Douglas. There was the LA Times Event Center, the Boeing campus, the Point and Plaza, Top Golf certainly, the old Hacienda Hotel, Cambria Hotel, the 777 and 555 Aviation, the Frank Gehry buildings, Invesco, and you all know how interesting that project was. And there were just too many projects to name all, but I just kind of mapped it out, and all the projects that we put our fingers on, and then you add the things that we did at Smoky Hollow, the Smoky Hollow plan. There's changes that we made in downtown. There's going to be significantly more changes in the next 12 months. And then we rewrote the R1 zoning standards, which was really big. That was a big change. And what I noticed is the city has changed, grown, evolved so much over the last decade. And I'm really glad to have been part of it. And I think you should all be proud that you've all made significant contribution to the city. I want to thank staff, you, and most importantly, I want to thank El Segundo for allowing me to serve as the development director for the past decade. And it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I've truly enjoyed our time together over, it's really been 10 years, huh?
Yep.
Wow.
I think when I got here, I was thinking back. There might have been 3 reasons I came to El Segundo, and one of them was my son was going into high school, and I really wanted to watch him play basketball. This is one of my favorite sports. And Ryan and I were kind of talking about this. His son is just going into high school, so that boy is now out of college, medical school, and he's going to be a resident. And my daughter is out of her college too. So, you know, it's time, and it's been great. And thank you so much.
No, it's been a real pleasure, Sam. It's been a joy to work with you, and I just want to thank you for. I mean, I can't even think of all the times where you have gone above and beyond, where we've had meetings with people to try to resolve things on a personal level, and that really says a lot about your dedication to this town. And it's part of what makes El Segundo special, is that it's really a personable place to live, where people care about one another. And I just want to thank you for the time you've given to us and all the things you've done for us. I'm really in your debt.
Thank you. So with that, the next item is commissioners, right? Report from City Attorney's Office.
Nothing
Anything
from
for us,
me,
Greg?
thank you. Nothing, thank you.
Okay, Planning Commissioner comments. Eduardo, can we have a report about enforcement of the conditions on the Chick-fil-A drive-through? Because I recall being very clear about, if one car backs up on Maple, I will take away your drive-through. And I have tons of photographs and video that people send me of traffic bad on PCH. So if there's been contact from the city to Chick-fil-A and a response, if you could just summarize that for me, please, so that I know that when we put something like a parking study plan on an office building, and they're supposed to report, and there's actually enforcement behind these things that we say at the meetings. That's what I'm looking for, okay? Especially if we're losing our loss of service leverage to redo the in and out. I don't think we would have been able to redo the in and out intersection under the VMT, right? Because we would have rolled in there and they would have said, oh no, regionally, who cares if it's an in and out or Chick-fil-A? But because we had loss of service, like, we got a redone intersection that's really benefited our city. So bigger problems. How do we as a local planning commission deal with local traffic under a VMT analysis? And I'm just going to throw that out there because I don't know what the answer is for that. But I would like a report on the Chick-fil-A drive-through, please. All right. Any other comments, guys? Kevin, welcome. So happy to have you with us. So happy to know that you've got a background in actually reading and understanding traffic studies. I've been reading a lot of them, and that doesn't automatically mean understanding. So I look forward to having your input, your professional expertise, and another voice on this committee. So I'm very happy to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be a part of the Planning Commission. It was nice to kick it off from my first meeting to actually have a MND that, you know, that I could look at and comment on. So, but yeah, traffic, I mean, for all of us, I think traffic is an issue. And I hope that I can bring my previous work into this, you know, my expertise. But it is a big hit that the level of service is not the main criteria. But I do think that we have to collectively find a way how we can work that into our project approvals, or at least make it a consideration in our project approvals. Because you're absolutely right that if you don't have the level of service intersection at the intersections, you don't know what upgrades to make. Jay, you mentioned the U-turn at Mariposa. I see people making U-turns there all the time, which, you know, they're allowed to, it's fine, but that curb, they always jump the curb with their tires. So I mean, that there needs to be improvements there, but we don't know that doing a VMT analysis.
Right.
So
those two lanes are extremely narrow.
Yeah.
The turn lanes.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I don't know if that takes us modifying our, you know, the circulation element, or just putting it into some sort of just standard approval procedure. I don't know what the answer is, but if it's not going to be allowed in CEQA, I think that we have to find a way to incorporate it ourselves.
Yep. And it's clear that there's going to be additional impacts at that same intersection in the future. So, you know.
So, but I'm happy to be here. Thanks. I look forward to working with you guys more and more. And thank you, Sam. I just came on. I just came on, Sam. But yeah, just looking at your map and everything filled in was pretty impressive.
Sam, are you leaving because Kevin just joined us, or? Interesting timing.
Kevin's fault.
I believe. You're gonna love it. You're gonna do great, Kevin.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Welcome, Kevin, and I look forward to learning a lot from you. And Sam, thank you very much for all of your years. It's been a real pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sam, you have been awesome. I mean, you've been such a great part of this whole commission and the tone and the vibe of how we approach things. So please keep us posted with where you end up. It'd be nice to hear from you.
Thank you. Will do.
I'm going to reiterate the same. We will miss you terribly. It's been great to work with you. And I guess we're going to take loss with the win. Kevin, welcome. And we can already definitely see your value moving forward. So I think we can all be relieved as traffic becomes a bigger and bigger question, that we have somebody who actually knows what they're talking about involved. So thank you for joining us.
You know, I presented to the council during the strategic planning meeting some of the projects that are coming. They're coming in the next 6 to 9 months, and I mean I couldn't go beyond that because we have so many projects coming in the next 6 to 9 months. Normally I go like 12, 18 months. You all are going to be extremely busy, and traffic is going to be an issue for probably all of those projects.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Good meeting, and we'll now be adjourned. Our next meeting is going to be May 13, 2021 at 5:30. Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Bye.